Oikein hyvää iltaa ja tervetuloa jälleen Israel nyt -katsauksen pariin. Minä olen Pasi Turunen, Patmos-lähetyssäätiön toiminnanjohtaja, ja tämän katsauksen tarjoaa sinulle Patmos-lähetyssäätiö. Sota Gazassa on kestänyt jo 8 kuukautta. Se alkoi lokakuun 8. päivä, kun lokakuun 7. päivänä Hamas teki yllätyshyökkäyksen Israeliin Gazasta käsin ja aloitti julman tappamisen. Tässä vaiheessa, kun olen näitä Israel nyt -katsauksia tehnyt jo yli 40 kappaletta, on hyvä ja asianmukaista hiukan tarkastella myös sitä, että millä tavalla Israelissa Jeesukseen uskovien yhteisö on kokenut tämän tilanteen. Millä tavalla se on koetellut Jeesukseen uskovien juutalaisten ja arabien välisiä suhteita ja millä tavalla seurakunta elää uskoansa todeksi kaiken tämän keskellä. Vieraanani on pastori David Zadok armo- ja totuusseurakunnasta Israelista linjojen päässä. Pahoittelen, että tämän haastattelun aikana pikkusen ääneni kaikuu aina kysymyksen kohdissa, mutta äänenlaatu muuten on haastattelun aikana ihan kohdallaan. Joten tervetuloa tämänkertaisen Israel nyt -katsauksen pariin ja tervetuloa pastori David Zadok.
Glad for this opportunity to be with you, Pasi.
Now, October 7th, early in the morning, you and Eddie Golder, the evangelist of your church, were here in Finland as our guest. Could you tell us what happened in that morning when you started receiving first signals that something is going on in Israel at the Gaza border?
Yes, actually, we arrived in Finland about 5:30 in the morning, and after checking in our hotel, we went to rest for a short while. And very early, I think it was about 6:30 or 6:45, my wife called, which I was surprised, and she kind of actually said, "David, have you heard there is a war?" And having slept, I don't know, half an hour the whole night, I said, "We're here in Finland," because my thought was immediately that, okay, I'm here in Finland, there is a war between Russia and Ukraine, and Finland has a long border with Russia. So I asked her, "We're here in Finland?" She said, "No, David, here in Israel, in Gaza." And then within few seconds, I understood what was going on, and then messages from one of our elders came that we are canceling our service, and that's when everything began.
The first, you didn't have a chance to get to Israel right away. I think it took a little while with the flight arrangements and everything.
Yeah, I almost immediately, even though it was Saturday morning, I called our travel agent and I told her, "Listen, we need to come back urgently." And she told me, "David, all of the airlines have canceled their flights except maybe El Al. Give me about an hour or two, I see what I can do." And then later on she called and she says, "The earliest that I could get you is on Monday night from Helsinki to Berlin with Finnair, and then from Berlin with El Al to Israel." And as you know, we left Monday afternoon and we arrived home in Israel on Tuesday early in the morning. I remember very clearly after about an hour or two that I was home and seeing everything I saw also on the road and also in the plane and speaking with people. I told Etty, my wife, I said, "Listen, I feel like I left for less than 48 hours and I feel I landed in a totally different country that I left."
When did you realize that this was something different than before? Because there have been wars and conflicts. Usually they take a few weeks and then they're over in Gaza, and the tension has been there all the time. How long did it take for you to realize, and how did it feel to realize that now this is something really serious?
Yeah, I think I realized it as soon as I understood that they were Hamas terrorists that invaded various kibbutzim and cities in the south, sometimes 8, 9, 10 kilometers inside in Israel. That in that kind of situation has never happened. And also the number of missiles and the number of damages, people who were killed, people who were brutally killed, I should say, and families, children, small children, and others, and then seeing that they were carrying civilians into Gaza. That's when I realized that we are in a totally different war or any kind of operation that we've been before. I think it was one of our poets, I don't remember his name, he once said that in Israel, we have only 2 seasons. In most countries, there are 2 or 4 seasons. But in Israel, we have 3 actually, not 2. We have winter, summer, and war. And the fact that we are 8 months into this war, which has been the longest war that we have ever been involved since 1948, just shows how different this war is, intensity of it, and of course, even now, nobody knows when it's going to end and how it's going to end, and we still have the north to take care of, and the story there, it's not even began in some ways.
Right. Well, we could talk much about the political situation there, but for this moment, how has this situation affected the church and the Jesus, the followers of Jesus, in your church and also in the country?
Well, I think the impact of it has been in many levels. At the very basic level, it was within a couple of days, we had 36 men and women from our relatively small congregation of 160 people or so that were recruited. Among them, our youngest daughter and also our son-in-law. So that obviously immediately impacted, because many of these young people are involved in the various church activities, whether it's on the online or the translation and other events in the church, which immediately impacted. And then, of course, as you know, we immediately set up an emergency fund in order to help the various families, both from our church, because we had 5 families that had to be evacuated, and we needed to find them a place where they can stay. And of course, there were many other needs that started to come. Many of our soldiers that were in their units, they had a lot of needs for life-saving events, and of course, many parents who had their children in this war, certainly at the beginning and even today, are very concerned. Especially every day we hear about the war and about the injured and about those soldiers who have been killed, whether it's in the south particularly, of course, and in other areas.
Right. How has this situation affected the relations between Jewish followers of Jesus and Arab followers of Jesus?
I have to say that to my surprise, it hasn't impacted much. In fact, there's been a lot of cooperation between some of the Arab churches in Nazareth and some of the organizations here in Israel that were helping with packing and parcels and food parcels at the beginning of the war. But 3 days ago, my wife and I were at Lehman School, which is one of the many projects of Patmos. It's a school for disabled children that they are both Israelis and Arabs. I think there it has certainly impacted the core structure of the school. But all in all, I think that it has not impacted. I think the greatest thing and the most encouraging maybe issues that we saw in our particular church was that we had a baptism not long ago, and there were 4 people that were being prepared for baptism. One of them was a soldier who fought for 4 months in a tank unit in Gaza. The other one was an Arab guy that was converted, and I had the privilege of teaching them together with 2 other young ladies the baptismal class. And so this is also the work of God, that often in the middle of darkness and death, he brings his light. And we know, just like a diamond that shines much brighter in the background of the black velvet, this is what we are seeing and experiencing. But obviously, this is not an easy situation with the delicate structure between our 2 peoples in Israel.
Well, if we go that much into this situation in the country, how does it seem there, and what is the general feeling about this war? And I mean, we just had the chance to hear the good news that 4 Israeli hostages were rescued in a very daring operation right from the middle of the civilian area in the Nuseirat area, and I think there was a brief celebration and joy, I think, in Finland, well, in Finland as well, for us who heard it. But I mean, in Israel. So how did it change the atmosphere there, or what has happened?
Well, it definitely changed. I think, there was, it was being reported, there were very few dry eyes. Myself, I mean, I'm not very emotional. But I had tears, because these are people that nobody knew if they're alive, what's their condition, because since October 7th that they were captured, we have never heard anything from any of them, not through the Red Cross or obviously through Hamas or any other. And all of a sudden to hear that 4 of them, as you said, in a heroic action in the middle of the day in the most populated civilian area were rescued was a great joy. But at the same time, people also kept reminding each other that we still have 120, and the price that was paid was that a 24-year commander, married with 2 children, he was killed in that operation. And but I think that was something also that it really showed something about the strength of our people, in a sense that, we say that, in Israel, our soldiers endanger their lives to protect us, the civilians. With the Hamas terrorists, they are using the civilians in order to protect themselves. And I think that's the difference that, unfortunately, most of the world doesn't understand that.
Now, this brings to my next question. Have you been surprised at all by how the international community and media has treated Israel during this conflict?
Yes, certainly. I don't know, Pasi, if you remember, I think it was on Saturday, we had lunch together with Eddie. And, there were a lot of relatively positive news coming, certainly from Finland media and the worldwide media already by noon or early afternoon on Saturday and certainly Sunday. But I think when we were having the lunch on Saturday, I think I remember saying something to the effect that I think this would not last very long. And lo and behold, within a few days, everything was changed. So in some ways, I was not surprised, but I think I was surprised at the level of the intensity of the media and how everybody was talking, about the humanitarian issue, which it is no doubt an issue. We are all concerned, even we as individuals and the congregation. We try to help the Arabs and other needs in areas that are needed. But nobody spoke about the hostages. Nobody spoke about the hostages as well as the harassment, the sexual harassment that many of them went through. Nobody talked about the fact of the civilians that brutally were killed on October 7, including babies that were put in ovens, and elderly, young, old people were killed and dragged almost like animals into Gaza. And I think that that's really shows the sad reality in which we live in, but also it kind of shows a very clear demarcation between the good and the evil. As often we know, part of the evil is calling good evil and calling evil good. And I think that that's something we are saying. I'm not saying that everything we have done, Israel, is perfect. But obviously we've done things that we should be ashamed of, and I hope that we are ashamed of. But all in all, given the condition in which we are in, and as you know, we live in a tough neighborhood from north, south, and even those who are a few thousands of kilometers from us, including Yemen and Iran, that we don't have a common borders. They have become one of our worst enemies. And but I still can say, again, from personal experience, my own, being a major in the Israeli army, being in the military for 20 years, but also in this last 7-8 months, speaking with literally tens, if not more, of commanding officers, both believers but even non-believers, I still can say that Israel Defense Forces, IDF, is one of the most moral militaries in the world, given the situation that we are in. I mean, we are fighting Hamas terrorists in one of the most dense area, both above the ground and also under the ground. I've heard from various officers. One of them is a very dear friend of mine. He's a believer. And he told me, he said, David, I can't tell you how many hundreds of times we had what we call gold target from one of the terrorists. And at the last moment, at the last minute, we saw that there were children or civilians that were in the area that most likely would be killed. And immediately you can hear all over in the communication devices the word in Hebrew, which is chadal, kind of shouting that, which means it's even stronger than stop. And again, mistakes do happen. We are all human, and when you think of these soldiers, many of them young, fighting under such an intense situation, 24/7 for months, away from their families, their children, from loved ones. Most of them left not just families, but their businesses, the schools, their studies, and they are fighting. It's not an easy situation that I think most people don't try to realize what's going on here.
David Zadok, we didn't agree beforehand what I'm going to ask from you. Now, you being a pastor and the teacher of the Word of God, I would like to ask you one theological question that pertains to this situation that we are in. You mentioned that you have your own military background. I know that Jewish followers of Jesus are also serving in the IDF. How do you balance, and what kind of theology of war have you had to deal with? Because this is a reality where Israel lives much more than, I mean, in Scandinavia or many other places. This is a real thing for you. It's not just a theological exercise. You have to bring that theology into the real life. And how do you balance that with the fact that there are people on the other side as well?
You know, I have to say that before this war, it wasn't that difficult because it is part of reality. It is required in Israel. And I think that in some ways, you know, when Jesus was asked by the Pharisees whether they should pay taxes or not, he said, you know, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to him, what belongs to God. And also, as we read in Romans chapter 13, we are commanded to obey our government, as long as obviously the command is or what they are requiring from us is not against the word of God. And so for us, it's not an issue in a sense that we are fighting a war and we need to protect our families, our homes, and our land. And if you look historically, since 1948, almost all of the wars that we have been fighting was not started by us. As you know, it always gives an advantage to the side that does the first strike. But almost all of the wars that we have fought, certainly the major ones, we were not the ones who initiated. We had to react. And that's one of the many reasons that our military called Israel Defense Forces. It's not Israel military, it's not Israel attack forces, it's Israel defense. But as I said, this war brought me on a personal level to a very challenging in terms of my theology and my nationalism. I think at the beginning of the war, especially within a week, as more and more pictures, videos, and news were coming in about what has happened on October 7, on that black, horrible, dark day, you know, my thoughts were that, you know, we need to go in and level Gaza. And to be honest, knowing our Air Force and military, within maybe a day or less or a little bit more, it would be easy to flatten Gaza. And that was something that, you know, deep down, I wanted. And it took me a while. It took me a while not only to confess that, but to realize that, yes, I am Israeli. I've seen this, but I'm also a Christian and a follower of Christ. And I think the command that the Lord really impressed in my heart was, you shall love your enemies. Now, before October 7, you know, often when we think, I think most of us, when we think about our enemies, we think about those who don't like us. You know, sometimes it can be somebody in the office, somebody in the work, somebody in school, somebody in the university or somebody that is, don't like us, or we don't like them, or even our enemy that is far away. But when your enemy is someone that is so brutal, that it doesn't care about nothing except your total annihilation and destruction, and to love him or her, it's totally a different story. And what really God used that conflict in my own personal heart was that he showed me that, in a sense, in many ways actually, I was God's enemy. I was God's hater, and yet God, in his great love, sent his son to die for me, specifically. And again, it's part of my theology. I do believe in predestination, that before the foundation of the world, God in his love chose me, not because I'm good, but actually because I'm not good, and I needed God, and I was God's hater and rejecter and covenant breaker, and yet he chose me because of his love. And that was the point that, in my life, and things change, and that's when we personally, even from our own personal finances, we started to support some of our Arab and Palestinians, brothers and sisters, whether it's in Bethlehem or other places.
Yes, that would have been my second question. What does this mean in practice in this situation when we are called to love our enemies? I mean, does it mean that Israel will have to withdraw from Gaza, or is this something how we live it out in our personal lives, not letting the hatred to take place?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, both for us personally as believers and also for our government, it doesn't help to hate. Hate eventually eats you from inside out. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is that it's always a different thing on a personal level than on a national level. Our government, like any other government in the world, is not a Christian government. We don't live under a theocracy yet, unlike what it was in the Old Testament. So I think that the response of the government and the responsibility of the government, I should say, is different from our own personal, and even as a church, our response ought to be different. We, as a government, I think it needs to do what it takes to make sure that things like this do not happen. We still have 120, 130,000 people that have been evacuated since October 7. One of them is a family from our church that since then they haven't been back to their home. And we need to do what it takes to bring life to a normal situation for our people. And that's a responsibility of government. Meanwhile, our responsibility, both as a church and personally, is to go the extra mile that Christ calls us, to show our love for our neighbor. We need to be the good Samaritan, and to show and to use that by showing our love and by going the extra mile, showing to both our people, both the Jews and the Arabs, the power of the gospel. Because I think that it's only and only the power of the gospel that in this kind of situation, in this kind of war, and in this kind of hatredness that we see around us can show the deep strength and the love and the power, especially, of the gospel. That's the real transformation that can happen, and it's only through the gospel of Christ.
So maybe I can summarize like this: that in our personal ethics, we have to follow this rule, like you said. We love our enemies and don't let the hate eat us up or be our guiding principle. On the other hand, there is nothing unloving with the objectives of this war, namely dismantling Hamas' capability of governing Gaza, bringing back the hostages, and making sure that Israel can live in safety and in peace. There is nothing unloving in securing these objectives. Brother David, let's talk little about what the church is doing at the moment, and for decades, Patmos Foundation and Grace and Truth has been in partnership, and it is our privilege. Can you take a few words about this partnership and what it has meant for the work of the church, even these times?
Well, certainly for many years, it's been an amazing cooperation. We are very, very grateful and thankful, not just for the support and for the care, but particularly for the faithfulness. I think from almost very beginning of our church, Patmos has stood side by side with us, very graciously and very faithfully, and that has enabled us to be really a light to our people, whether it's through the schools, whether it's through the clinic that for many years helped with the new immigrants from Russia in the early 90s, and whether it's now in this war that helping with some life-saving equipment that Patmos helps us to purchase for one of the hospitals in the south, and whether it's the support for our evangelists. In fact, Eddie, at the moment yesterday, he flew with another 12 Holocaust survivors to Poland. These are people who are basically experiencing, in some ways, a second Shoah for some of them, because many of them who are in Sderot, who are now with Eddie, at the beginning of the war, they had to leave their homes. Some of them, they said, we're not going to leave. We don't have any other place. We were kicked out when we were, from Europe. We are in Israel, and now, even though we are in Sderot or Ashkelon, wherever we are, we don't have any other place we can go. So he's now with them, with 12 of them who've gone to the war in a difficult situation, just taking them out of the country, giving them a little bit of peace of mind, but also just helping them to see a little bit, visit some churches and to visit some sites in Poland, and also to have an intense time of sharing the gospel, studying the scriptures, and showing the love of Christ also to Gentile brothers. Poland, which was also, in addition to Germany, one of the countries that in their land only Jews were brutally killed and destroyed.
Now, October 7 has definitely left a deep scar to the psyche of Israel. Have you seen an increasing openness to the gospel during these months, or what has been the spiritual impact?
I think that definitely there has been an openness. And I think part of the openness is that our people are in despair. I think it was in Jeremiah chapter 9, if I remember, that God says, don't put your trust in chariots and horses. And I think that for too long, as a nation, as a people, we have put our trust in our military, in our Iron Dome, in our technology, and in our many things. And I think that within hours, God kind of pulled the rug out of our feet, and everything that we thought we can rely on and trust, including our military, which again, it failed horribly. Thankfully, since then they have recovered and they are heroically fighting and doing everything they can to protect us now. But that has been part of the whole situation, that because of that despair, people are open to listen. We have brought so much support as a church, again, to Patmos and many other evangelical organizations, to hospitals, to the military units, to evacuees, to the needy and others. And in all of them, one of the first things that I tell them, especially certainly those people that this is the first time I meet them, I say who I am, and I tell them, I'm a pastor of Grace and Truth. We are Jewish Christians. We believe in the Old and the New Testament. And we believe that Jesus is the promised Messiah of our prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, and others. And sometimes they ask more questions, but there has never been any case when they say, okay, we don't want to hear from you. And that has opened an opportunity. As I said, in our church, we had 4 people. The soldier that I mentioned, that he was baptized after being about 5 months in a tank unit in Gaza. As we were standing in the water and giving his testimony, one of the things he says that as he was there deep down in Gaza, he felt that God is with him and protecting him. And he said that it was then that I felt that God is calling me to repent. And so within 2 or 3 days after he was released, both him and his wife, by the way, at the same time, both were converted. It was Friday afternoon, late in the afternoon. Saturday morning, they both came to the church with a big smile. And that was the first thing that they mentioned as I went to greet them. So God is doing a great work in the midst of death and darkness. And that's how God often works. We see that throughout the scriptures. Often in the midst of despair, he brings hope and he shines his light even more so.
With these thoughts, David, we will bring this interview to a close. Thank you for your thoughts, and may God bless you, your family. May he bless your church, and may the whole body of Yeshua serve as a light in this time of despair and darkness, and bring something good out of this situation for the glory of God and for the glory of Jesus. Thank you, David, so much.
Thank you, and amen.
Amen. Tässä oli tämänkertainen Israel nyt -katsaus. Vieraanani oli pastori David Zadok Armo- ja totuusseurakunnasta Israelista. Paljon kiitoksia ja tavataan ensi kerralla. Moi moi.